Hi, you're here live with CMajor, and we are here on CMajor before the show. Thank you for joining me this morning. And we're talking about 7 chords today. I'm so glad you could join me. It's a beautiful day here in the greater New York City area, and we're going to take our time this morning and just talk with you about some chords, basically. Basically, we'll talk about 7 chords. And we are a little less scripted today, too. So sit back and just relax and just enjoy the conversation. If you care to send me any messages on social media, I will happily take a look at those as well. And it's going to be a fun show. It's going to be a fun show. I'm broadcasting something new for you today. And I hope you'll stick with me. 7 chords. It's a great way to express your feelings in music using 7 chords. It's all about expressing your feelings in a musical way. Playing music your way makes you feel better. So whether you're sad, whether you're lonely, whether you're feeling neglected, or even hopeful, you can find an appropriate way to make your own music and make your dreams come true. You choose. You decide which chord you use. And so now we're going to put another type of chord into your tool belt to use as you're making music. So just bear with me today because I don't even have an outline of what I'm going to say. I really don't. It's just all in my mind, what I want to tell you. And so we'll just start from the top. It's the 8th episode of the Keyboard Situation, Play by Chords and by Color series. And so if you've been with us all the other episodes, you know that we started from the very top talking about major chords. And then we delved into minor chords. And then we talked about something else. And we talked about something else after that. And we talked about something else after that. And here we are at episode number 8. So you may be wondering, what's next, C major? We'll decide that. We'll decide because we can go in different directions at this point. We can go into 9 chords if you want. We can talk more about rhythms. But I will say this. We're in the 8th episode. And so what that means is we'll have episode 9, episode 10, episode 11, and episode 12. So we do have 4 episodes remaining in this series. So I will tell you that. So you can go ahead and plan for that. So basically a month's worth of episodes. Unless, of course, I decide to double up during the week. But thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you are having a great day so far. And if you are in the greater New York City area, you know that we are getting some cloudiness in our forecast. So just be safe out there. It's a little rainy, so make sure you have your umbrellas with you and just be safe as you're walking around and driving around. And take some music with you. Take some music with you as well. So, what do I want to say about 7 chords? Well, if you're sticking around for the 3rd hour, what I plan to do is just go ahead and demonstrate that. So we'll hear a little bit of the piano coming through in the background a little bit later. You may hear me hitting some of the top keys right now. Somebody wanted to know which keyboard I'm using for this podcast. I'll go ahead and tell you that. I'm using a MIDI keyboard. Or I should say a MIDI-enabled keyboard. The kind that you can hook to your computer, and that way you can use virtual software instruments of any sound of your choice and make some things happen. So It's a great keyboard to use for sound recording if you're into that. And that way you can change your sound. So 1 minute you can sound like you're playing a very rich sounding grand piano on stage, and then you can make it sound like something else in another moment. But if you want to know my preference, I do prefer to practice and perform on a real grand piano, meaning a Steinway, a Yamaha. Those are really my top preferences. And I have experience with the Bosendorfer, I have experience with Baldwin, with Kawai, other brands that are out there. But my top preference is really Steinway. If I can get my hands on one, Steinway and Yamaha, I would say be the top. And if you are in New York, you can go ahead and stop by the Steinway showroom, which is near Rockefeller Center, I believe. And then if you're in New Jersey, that's a different matter. But here in the greater New York City area, it's possible to visit a showroom and feast your eyes on the beauty of those grand pianos, which is so special to us. So, I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over to my book and just start the discussion on seventh chords. Because I know I must have piqued your interest when I said playing music your way makes you feel better. Sadness, loneliness, neglect, or even hope. And if you listen to the promo, I said, it's not inappropriate. I was actually laughing inside when I said that, because I had been told that previously by a couple of people, that expressing your feelings through music is not appropriate. Forget feelings. It's not appropriate. It's nice to know that's how some people think. Some of my musician friends think that you should not lead with your feelings when it comes to music making. And I can agree with that, especially if you are into composing, solid composing. But I attended a concert over the weekend that I'm going to share with you. And so when you start to hear about the way the composers are talking about their music making, you might be surprised. Might change your viewpoint on that. Should you lead with your feelings if you are writing music? Or should you lead with something else? Should you always just be thinking about music making and not feeling what you're doing? And then you have another school of thought out there that whether you write from your feelings or whether you write from your mind, that you need to make people feel something. That's interesting too. So right now, I'm just searching for that program so I can share it with you a little bit later. Aren't you glad we're live? Give a hand clap if you're glad that we're live. Yes, thank you so much. And of course, you know that I want to know, did you do your homework? I did post some homework over at CMajor's classroom, so if you had a chance to look over there, then you know I was expecting you to practice a drill. Did you do it? Were you able to get to it? Well, I hope so, because we're going to be adding to that today. That's right. We're going to be adding to that. Okay, So lots to get to today. I actually kind of like working off script because it allows me to kind of just do everything based on how I feel in the moment. So getting back to that topic, how do I feel about writing music from your feelings? I think it's a good thing if you can do it. But I think that it's helpful if you have some sort of vocabulary so that you can just jump right in and start making the music you really intend to make, as opposed to wondering what to play next. Because, as I've said before, all chords are leading to something. They work together. One chord is going to follow another chord. So you're either heading towards something or you're moving away from something. But let's say if you only knew 2 chords, well, chances are you're just going to stay with those. And then you have more of what they call a minimalist approach to music making. There's nothing wrong with that. Actually, I was in New York yesterday, and I was passing through Port Authority, and somebody was sitting at one of those pianos. You know, the pianos that they set up where you can just sit and just play, and if you can get to one. And there was a person. I didn't really pay that close attention to who the person was or why they were sitting at the piano. I just listened to the sound and just briskly walked by on my way to where I was going. And they just kept playing the same thing over and over and over again. But it has some structure to it. And it has some intention to it. It has some feeling to it. And I thought, wow, this person's really expressing themselves. And they were playing chords. So, who knows what they were trying to say with their music making, but you could definitely tell he was working it out. And in a blues or jazz way of speaking, he was woodshedding, basically, with what he knew. So having a rich chord vocabulary is going to just give you more range for your music making. And yes, I do believe that you should try to make music from your feelings if you can, but also use your mind as well. So if you can create music with an intention of creating a certain feeling, that's even better. It's better than just waiting on a feeling to happen and then just sitting there and trying to make music around that feeling. So it's a topic probably best handled over a cup of coffee, to be honest. And that way you can sit around with your friends and just gather some thoughts. Okay, so I have my textbook. And then what I'm going to do is give you some examples of music that uses 7 chords. And so you hear me talking. You might hear me doing a little bit of playing, but I think what I'm going to do is save the demonstration, a full demonstration for the 3rd hour, so that way you can really see how to put it into your own practice drill or your chord workout, whatever you're calling it these days. I think we said workout. Okay, so as I'm looking in my old professor's book on blues and jazz. Oh, by the way, did you hear what happened to the owner of, I believe it's called Jazz Time magazine? Jazz Times magazine, I believe that's what it's called. So I think it was in New York Times today, if you have a chance to take a look at that article. But it just makes me wonder who may be taking over that publication following that announcement in the New York Times. Okay, so if you are into blues and jazz and improv, in this book that I'm looking in, and the book may be out of print, so see me if you would like to have an idea of the title of the book, to Google search it at least, and then find out for yourself if you can find it in print. but it's called Introduction to Blues, Jazz, and Improv. And what I like about it is that it starts out with 7th chords. So it says the jazz sound begins by using blue notes. A blue note is a lowered 3rd, 5th, or 7th step of a scale or chord. We will start by using a lowered 7th marked by, and then you have an asterisk sign. And then what they're showing you is a B flat, the one below middle C, an E flat, the one above middle C, and the F, the one above middle C. And so what's interesting to me is how it's labeled. So for the B flat that's below middle C, the one with its own short ledger line, it says key of C. And then for the E flat, it says key of F. And for the F, it says key of G. So they really are trying to show you the 7th. So the next step is just showing you how to create the jazz chord. So create a jazz chord sound by using a lowered 7th blue note. Play each chord several times. So I like this because it shows you a C 7th chord, and then an F 7th chord, a G 7th chord, and then a C 7th chord. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to lean over my MIDI keyboard and just play these sounds for you. Oh, by the way, it is a little warmer this week, so no space heater this week. It's not in the 50s and 60s like it was last week. It's actually increasing back to the 70s and 80s, so you may hear a little background noise with the air conditioning, so I hope it doesn't bother you too much. But I'm going to play now these chords. If you can hear that. Okay, good. Another one. That's your C7 chord. I'm playing a C in the root. Now I'm going to play an F7 chord with an F in the root. G7 chord, and then back to C7 chord. Okay. And so what they recommend doing is creating like a little drill for yourself, playing each chord several times. So if I do my C7 chord 4 times in a row, and I go to F7 chord, and I go to my G7 chord, and I go back to my C7 chord. And then it goes into the jazz feel. So I like what they're saying about this because a lot of my friends can really relate to this. A lot of my jazz friends, of course. The jazz feel. So rhythms in jazz are most important. They are what make jazz swing. Let me read that again. Rhythms in jazz are most important. They are what make jazz swing. And then practice the following example several times and experiment with a loose or jazz feel. So that's what I have been saying in previous episodes. Just needing the help with the swing part, playing loose. And so if you are challenged by that, there is plenty of help, a plethora of help all over the internet to help you to feel that swing feel or that jazz feel or that loose feel that you may be looking for. But I really appreciate my jazz friends. They are always busy and showing you what they're working on social media, and it's always nice to hear from them and to see their ideas. Also, of course, I like to pay tribute to history and all of the lady piano players that have come before all of us who are out here trying to make music the best way that we can. And so it's nice to know your history and to know all of those who came before you who put forth the same effort. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future, because I like to delve a little bit more into the history part sometimes over at the CMajor radio show. And speaking of the CMajor radio show, we're going to be talking about sharps and flats on tomorrow's show, so you don't want to miss that. It's a very important show because I've dealt with musicians who did not read music and they called every black key a sharp, and that was their main question. Is every black key a sharp? So we're going to be answering that question over there. A lot of times my musician friends who can play circles around all of us when it comes to gospel and jazz, because they haven't studied formally, they may just refer to a key as a sharp key. So a key that I would call something else, they may just refer to it as, oh, I'm in the key of, and then blank, fill in the blank, sharp. But we'll say more about that. It's kind of a spoiler alert, if you will, but I want to have you join me over there if you want to hear that conversation, at least for the first hour, because we're definitely going to delve into that over there on tomorrow's show at the CMajor radio show. But thank you for joining me today. So now, let's forge ahead and talk about some other things you can do with 7 chords. So playing in the jazz style, lowered thirds, fifths, and sevenths are added to create jazz-sounding chords and rhythms. And there's an example here for that. So I want to play that example, but I will tell you the sequence. So they have a C7th chord for 2 measures, followed by an F7th chord for 2 measures, a C7th chord for 2 measures, a G7th chord for 2 measures, a C7th chord for 2 measures, an F7th chord for 2 measures, a C7th chord for 2 measures, a G7th chord for 1 measure, and then you end with a C. So this is a really good book because it really takes you step by step. And now, my favorite topic that I've been dabbling with over the past few weeks, as I was teasing myself about the swing part. And so I'm going to say more about handful of keys today too. So I'm sure you'll enjoy hearing what I'm going to say about that, because it definitely includes some 7 chords. So swing and swing time. If you want to know a little bit more about swing, swing is considered more than a style of big band music. It's also a jazz technique that is the heart and soul of good jazz playing. The official definition of playing something in swing time is playing eighth notes as if they were a triplet consisting of a quarter note and an eighth note. So for example, and then it shows you 2 beamed eighth notes, but showing you that it's actually played as a triplet, as a quarter note going to an eighth note. Or if you want to say long, short, you can talk in those terms too. Talking in those terms sometimes it helps with my students who just feel that they are rhythmically challenged and not able to follow how to count and play at the same time. But that's a guideline and not a hard and fast rule. I'm so glad they said this, because sometimes with non-musicians and with students, they really want to know what the hard and fast rules are, and they'll stick you to it. They'll hold you to it. Because if you vary from that, they'll be right there to say, but you said. So you just have to remind them to stay a little bit more flexible in their thinking, a little bit more relaxed. So don't expect to get this concept right away. We're talking about the swing. It's a special feeling that will eventually become natural when you play it enough. Now, I think that's true. I really believe that if I tried hard enough and I really sat down and just said, I'm going to conquer playing swing, that I could do it. But I think that's really what it is. You have to have the will to do it. So, in this picture, in this book, I like it because they give you some very good historical references. And you can't talk about swing without talking about Frank Sinatra. And I'm glad to talk about Frank Sinatra today because my neighbors were playing the music of Frank Sinatra over the weekend. Loudly. Very loud. They were playing the music. And I didn't even know they were Sinatra fans until I heard that. But Frank Sinatra developed his style around swing music. He was the vocalist for both Harry James and Tommy Dorsey, two of the big band era's giants. He emerged early in his career with a style rooted in the swinging feeling of the tunes he was singing, syncopated yet smooth. And you know someone else who's really good at swing who's still with us, and that's Mr. Tony Bennett. I just want to give a shout out to Mr. Tony Bennett today. Such a living legend, and we're very lucky to have his music and his music making, and I'm very, very, very grateful to have heard his music making in person. So, getting back to swing, here's a swing feel warm-up in 6/8 time. Of course, I'm not going to play that for you today. I want to embarrass myself by playing a swing feel for you, especially when I have friends and students who are really, really good at swinging. So, but I will play it for you if you come to me for lessons. I'll show you what I have. So until I attend Swing University, I'm going to refrain from playing with the swing feel over this podcast. But I will talk about what I've been doing. So Handful of Keys was my challenge piece to play. So that's with the stride piano feel to it. And the reason I want to bring this up is because the first page of the music, and yes, I was reading it, the first page of the music is in the key of G. And so it starts off with the G chord, and then it goes into a D seventh chord. So throughout the first page of the music, it looks like the D seventh chord is used the most. Besides other chords, of course. So you have diminished chords, which we haven't talked about. You have some minor chords, which we have talked about. So if you're interested in following this sequence, I'm not going to post it at CMajor's classroom. I'm not going to post it over there. But if you're interested, just let me know. And I'll be happy to try to give you the sequence, at least from the first page. And to also guide you on where you can find this for yourself online as well. Okay, so now let's move on to my further discussion of seventh chords. Skipping over some parts here because we have talked about those. Okay, now this is where I took that quote from for my introduction for today's show. So in the promo. And it came from the section in this book which talks about playing and singing the blues. So they describe the blues as music for and about people. And by using the special sounds of blue notes with a 12-bar blues chord progression, the blues offers a way, here it comes, wait for it, offers a way to express common feelings, sadness, loneliness, neglect, or even hope. Playing the blues helps you to express your feelings in a musical way that is satisfying because it makes you feel better. So that's where I took that quote from. But I think that can also apply to all music. And within the context of 7 chords, you may find that 7 chords makes you feel different or better when you sit down to play it. So I'm going to dabble in that a little bit today. So here's something that you can work on if you're interested in. I'll give you the sequence. So it's where you play a C7 chord, followed by an F7 chord, followed by a C7 chord, F7 chord, C7 chord, G7, F7, and then a C. And then it goes into another part where you're playing a C7, followed by an F7, followed by a C7. It has a first ending, and then it goes back and plays on the repeat a C7, F7, C7. Also gives you instructions to play that an octave higher. And then on the second ending, you go back to the beginning and play to the fine. So it gives you instructions for da capo el fine, which I don't think we've covered here in this podcast. I think, if anything, we might have mentioned it over at the CMajor radio show, but I don't think we've mentioned it there either. So it actually may have come up with some of the terms that we were talking about, like some of the most basic terms or common terms that parents should know if you are having a discussion with the teacher about music making. But maybe not even that either. But this is where music literacy is really helpful, because some of the terms from classical music, da capo el fine, del segno of, the del segno sign, can spill over into other genres. And so you have another term here, so you can go ahead and write this down. It's called loco. So loco is spelled L-O-C-O, and it means to play as written. So the reason why they put that there in this example was you were playing an octave higher on the repeat, but then they wanted you to go back to how you were playing it as written, and in this case, not an octave higher. So it's just little signs that you can put in there that would save you so much time, so many words, so you don't have to say, okay, man, when you go back to play that, make sure you don't play it an octave higher. Play it the way you were playing it before. See how many words I had to use? As opposed to, if you're in a rehearsal, you can just shout, loco, and the person knows what you mean. So, unless you like being very verbose and using a lot of words every single time you rehearse, there are shortcut ways of saying what needs to be done in the music and giving direction, especially if you're a boss and you're leading your own band or a jazz combo. So I said a little bit about this before in the past, but let me go ahead and just read this to you again, because I think it's important. And then what I'd like to do is continue talking with you about 7 chords, but I may just stop and give you a list of songs to consider for this week's homework, which I will also say at the end of today's podcast, because I want to make sure that you know what I expect you to listen to. Okay, so I'm going to do some skipping around here, but let me go ahead and just read to you a little bit about the blues and jazz chords, since we're talking about that today. So the exciting changes in jazz that have occurred over the years are most clearly heard when listening to and playing jazz chords and progressions. While the growing use of electronic instruments in jazz combos and bands altered performance styles, jazz harmony and the way that they were organized are largely responsible for the unique sound of jazz. Jazz harmony serves several functions. It is used to support a melody and add color to a song, the way that paint adds excitement to a drawing. Early jazz melodies were harmonized with simple three-tone chords in the background, known as triads. The blues continue to use this type of chord, organizing triads into the 12-measure blues progression. The early ragtime performers, such as Scott Joplin, added new interest and complexity by interchanging major and minor chords in their playing. Chords were extended. Chords with extended tones included sevenths, ninths, 11ths, and 13ths. Chords with extended tones appeared in the 1920s and 1930s in the stride playing of pianists such as Jelly Roll Morton, Fats Waller, and Art Tatum. Complex and more dissonant harmonies found favor with beboppers, Charlie Parker, and Dizzy Gillespie. The jazz harmonic vocabulary, which was expanded by such composers as Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, Bill Evans, and Keith Jarrett, added intervals of seconds, fourths, and the use of the modes. Another essential function of jazz harmony is to offer improvisers a source for creating new melodies. Jazz players read chord symbols, a musical shorthand that includes the name of the chord and the extended tones. These chord symbols tell the improviser which scales and chord tones can be used for creating an improv. A keyboard player usually comps, plays short syncopated rhythms during a solo, playing chords with the left hand, and the melody, improvised or written, in the right hand, or will comp with two-handed chords when backing up a soloist in a band. Let me start right there, because I've had students that will say to me, am I supposed to be playing chords in both hands? So if a student asks you that, if you're a teacher and you're listening to this podcast and a student asks you that and you're not sure how to answer, just start talking about the comping idea, because that's really what they're referring to. You know, there's such a myriad of information available on the internet. And if you're watching video after video after video to learn how to play the piano yourself, and you're trying to avoid having a teacher work with you because of your budget, because of just your own self-interest of wanting to teach yourself, just know that there are many ways to improve your music making. Depending on your goal, there are lots of things that you can do. And so, comping with two-handed chords is mainly used when you back up a soloist in a band, but it may be a style that you want to adopt for yourself in your own writing, in your own music making. Count Basie, one of the great big band leaders and pianists of the 1930s, was one of the first to use comping in his playing. Comping was used extensively by Bud Powell Thelonious Monk, Oscar Peterson, and other bop-style pianists to create rhythmic excitement and harmonic variety. Jazz pianists have increasingly expanded the use of altered chords, tones outside the basic chord substitutions, daring voicings, the arrangement of tones in a chord, and expanded the use of 2, 5, and chromatic chord progressions. So I'm going to stop there because what I want to do now is talk to you about something that came across my desk. I'm very excited about it because you can have access to it too, I believe. Either through this podcast or finding a way to get a copy of it yourself. So let me stop my music here for just a second. And let me go to that chart. So it was sent to me as a digital download, and I'm very grateful for it. So thank you to the publishing company that's making this available to us. And if you want to know more about it, I will let you know. I don't like to just start giving information unless it's something you really want to know, because I feel like if I say the name of something, or if I offer the company that's putting it out and things like that, that you just have to be very careful of the permissions to promote other people's publications, I think. But I will say this, that I do intend to use this for instructional purposes and educational purposes. If it can help someone, then that's how I want to use it. So we're building that type of content here on CMajor Before the Show. And the reason why I call it CMajor Before the Show is because this may be as far as you get in your own decision to make music. If you do have the goal to learn a musical instrument, you may just decide, you know what, I'm just going to start with chords. I don't care about reading music. I really just want to focus on the auditory benefits of playing an instrument. I'm not that interested in musical notation and sight reading. I'm not a strong visual learner. I really just want to learn to play by chords and by ear, and that's it. And that's fine. I have a real appreciation for that, and I have a real respect for those musicians who stop at that point and they say, I know who I am, I'm playing by chords and by ear, and that's it. And the reason why I respect that is because on the other end of the spectrum, I have friends who have double doctorate degrees, and they read music very well because they have a doctorate degree in performance, they have a doctorate degree in music education. Probably some of the most well-educated people that I know in music and music education. But here comes the but part. But if you ask them to do something as simple as sit down and play Happy Birthday by ear, they can't do it. So I'm saying that not to shame them and not to say it's a shame that they can't do it. I'm just saying they can't do it. But some people who play by ear may think of it as a shameful thing. You have all of this music knowledge under your belt and you can't sit down and play Happy Birthday unless the music is in front of you. You do have non-musicians and musicians alike who play by ear who think this way, who think it's a shame that you can't do that. But there's something to be said for that too. I mean, if you read music and you read music very well, that may be your commitment, is to read what's in front of you and to play that well. Whereas someone who can't read music at all wouldn't be able to do that. If you put the music in front of them, they would really struggle with knowing what to do and would need someone to tell them Okay, what's next? What do I do next? So, what was the point of that? The point of that was to say that I don't think any one type of music making is better than another. I think you have to do what works for you, which is why I opened up today's show with what I said. Playing music your own way makes you feel better. So if it makes you feel better to play by chords and by ear, then you should do that. So now, let's get to this publication that I'm really excited about. It's called The Really Useful Piano Poster. So you know what? I didn't even look at this website, but I have the download in front of me right now that I'm reading from. If you want to, go ahead and go over to thereallyusefulpianoposter.com and tell me what you find. And if I have a chance to, during this podcast, I'm going to pull it up so I can look at it with you. But it simply says www.thereallyusefulpianoposter.com. So what they're doing is making it very accessible for anyone that wants to just look up from your MIDI keyboard, your electronic keyboard, or in some cases your real piano, if you have one, and look at the wall in front of you and be able to access any chord name you need or want in that moment. And so, of course, 7 chords will be included in that. So what I like is, and I'm just scanning the page here with you, it says musical notation and sight reading. And then it has below that a handy reference of different musical notations, terms, and a diagram to help you with sight reading. So let's say if you were tired of playing the chords to your left and then you mosey on over to the right and then you see this, it just reminds you of what you're looking at when you look at a staff, or if you prefer, stave. So if you're looking at the grand staff, it shows you how everything lines up, and then you can just logically go, oh yes, that's right, that's what happens. So this can be useful for somebody that's using notation software, or in the case of recording with software instruments and you're using GarageBand or Logic. If you prefer the pronunciation GarageBand, you can say that too, but I say GarageBand. So if you're using GarageBand or Logic, this can be useful as well. So as you sit down to be super creative and make up your tracks, you may decide to use some of this as well. So I liked how organized this is. So it just gives you everything that we've been talking about really over at the CMajor radio show. Everything we've been starting to talk about with common notation, writing songs to chords to a song. Now that's helpful. And then you even have the circle of fifths. So if you care to use that. So I'm going to say a little bit about that today. And then I'm going to mosey back on over to the chord side of the poster. So just to give you an idea of how it's organized, I'm starting on the very right here where it says musical notation and sight reading. It's very concise, gives you the grand staff. And then underneath that you have key signatures, major and minor. And then underneath that you have common notation. So it's just giving you terms. And then underneath that, you have tempo ranges, writing chords to a song, so it just says when writing chord progressions, Roman numerals are used to indicate a chord's position relative to the scale. In order to write chord progressions for any major or minor key, we can follow these simple formulas. So that's interesting. And this is where a teacher can come in handy. So if you take this to a teacher and you say, can you help me with this? The teacher should be able to help you with that. Okay, then underneath that, at the bottom of the page, you have the circle of fifths. So the circle of fifths, just to read their definition, the circle of fifths is a diagrammatic. The circle of fifths is a diagrammatic representation of the relationship between the 12 tones of the chromatic scale. For example, the scales of F major and G major differ from the scale of C major by just one note, which is why they are placed either side of C on the circle. Knowing this helps when building chord progressions and harmonies. So you have an outer ring that shows you major keys, a middle ring which shows you minor keys, and an inner ring which shows you relative position. So you can use this if you are trying to use it to build your own chord progressions and harmonies. So far, I've just been giving you chord progressions, I've been giving you sequences, I've been giving you some harmonies to follow. I like to use this with students who are open to it. So it can be really, really useful. And this poster is really, really useful. That's why they called it that. Now stepping to the left over here, it just gives you a list of some common chords, and then it gives you major, minor, augmented, diminished, and then seventh, which is what we're talking about today. So we're aiming today to not only just talk about seventh chords as a dominant seventh, we're also going to talk about major sevenths as well, because I mentioned that in the last episode, I believe, or maybe the episode before that, but I believe it was the last one where I said that I had a professor that expected us to use seventh chords in our writing, and I shared with you my outcome of using seventh chords. So we're going to revisit that a little bit today so you can hear the difference since you are listening on the podcast. So thank you so much for listening today. Thank you for being with us. We're talking about seventh chords here on C Major before the show, and I'm glad you're here. So stay listening with us, and hopefully you can find a way to express your feelings in a musical way using seventh chords. So a dominant seventh chord consists of 4 notes: the root, the third, the fifth, and the flattened seventh of the scale. Its symbol is DOM, so dom or 7. An example, C dominant seventh can be written as C dom or C and the number 7. And so I'm going to be playing a little bit of this going into our third hour. Let me just check on my keyboard here for a moment. That's the thing with electronics. They go on, then they go off. Then things start beeping and jumping and flashing because they have their own timing. You have to check on those. Okay, so for instance, take a sip of water here. So, for instance, a C7 chord would be spelled C, E, G, B flat. So, of course, in a C major scale, you would go, oh, there's no B flat in a C major scale. No, there's not a B flat in a C major scale. But when you're playing a dominant 7th chord, you're going to play it as a flattened 7th. So that's the reason for the B flat. And I like what also they did here was they give you the inversions. So not only will you play C, E, G, B flat, you will invert that now by playing it as E, G, B flat, C, if you care to. Then invert it again, G, B flat, C, E, B flat, C, E, G. And then, of course, going back to the root position of C, E, G, B flat. So no matter how you mix it up, it's still going to be considered a 7th chord. I like what one of my professors used to say. He loved to say this. He said, it doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it Fred. It's still Fred. at the end of the day. It's still Fred. So that's just one example of a 7th chord, and that's if you care to play it just with the 4 notes. I like to play with more notes than that because I like to double the root. So you'll hear me play that a little bit later on. Now let's see why my GarageBand is jumping here. It's a little unhappy. So what I'm going to do now is minimize the really useful piano poster. Let's move that out of the way. And let's make sure that my sound stays up with GarageBand because I'm going to need that today. Okay. Okay, it's back. All right. So that's it for the really useful piano poster. Again, if you want more information, see me offline. See me offline. I'll give it to you. And just know that I'm going to be posting something over at CMajor's classroom. But it won't be that. It will be something else. And it won't even be a chord drill. I'm going to leave that to you today to work on your own chord drill, your own chord workout, warm up, however you like to label it for yourself. But in the future, I would like to introduce something more formal for your warm up so that as you sit down to the piano every single time, as you are warming up to write your own songs, warming up to play other songs, cover tunes, what have you, or just playing just the warm-up itself, that you have a set routine of how you're going to do that and go through the chords. So that won't be today, but that is definitely going to be coming up. Okay, so what I want to do now is turn your attention towards a project that came across my desk. And I am so curious to know if this project exists in iTunes and Apple Music. So let me go over here to the store for 1 second. And I'll come back to the music that I was playing underneath. And let me just look here and see, since I mentioned Mr. Bennett earlier, let me just see if this project is available in Apple Music. So bear with me 1 second. And then I'm going to go over to our sheet music friends and see if they have some of this music available so I can talk with you about those within the context of 7 chords. And of course, my computer has restarted. So I have to wait for that to come back up. Okay, so let's give that a moment. So while it's coming up, we'll do that first. We'll go to musicnotes.com. Or you can go to Sheet Music Plus if you care to. Okay, let me just remove this. I'm just changing some wires around for the moment. And again, it's just one of those things that happen when you're live. And you have to switch things out, so bear with me. Okay, so while that's starting up, let's go to my trusty iPad over here. Okay, so what I've done is I've pulled up the music of Gershwin. And first one is "It's Wonderful." And it's just labeled as composed by George Gershwin, and then you have the digital sheet music. Okay. Okay, I was just testing my sound there for a moment. Okay, so I really wanted to go over here so I can just turn your attention toward the outline of the scales. Outline of the chords. So you have A flat, and you have A flat minor, and then you have other chords that we haven't talked about yet. But let me just talk about the chords that we're addressing today. So, in the context of 7 chords, you have B flat 7th, then E flat major 7th. Oh, that's good. So we're talking about major 7 chords as well today. And then F minor 7th, followed by B flat 7th, E flat major 7th, E flat major 7th. Okay, so your homework assignment today is going to be to explore these 7 chords in this music. So, for copyright reasons, I'm not going to play this on the podcast. What I did just now, I just tested to see how the MIDI was working. So, if you go to musicnotes.com, when you buy the music, you can print it, you can play it. They have an iPad app that you can use that's free, that should work with any Mac or any PC in some cases. And it's also interactive. So I like also that you can transpose this. So if you're not comfortable in this key, you can go in and change it to a key that's comfortable for you. But either way you go, you're going to run into 7th chords that you need to address. So whether you're reading these 7th chords or whether you're just following the chord sequences, it's there for you to see. Okay, and I think it'll be a good exercise for you to see if you can follow the sequence. Okay, now, I hesitated before to tell you that you're going to come across something called a minor 7th chord, and in parentheses you have a flat 5. So you really have to know how to do that, how to make that happen. We haven't gone over that. And this is where having a teacher can really help you. So get with your nearest music professional to go over something like this. I think it would be really helpful to you to see the sequence and to see how to apply these chords, and then to study with someone who can help you with that. Or go online. You have plenty of help online as well. Okay, So just mark this down. So I'm going to give you, let's see, I think at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think we're going to give you 5 tunes to work on. Okay, so S Wonderful is going to be one of those. Some people just say the S and the W together. Swonderful. Okay, and all these tunes are by Gershwin. Okay, so, and then let's go with Nice Work if you can get it. Let's go with that one. And just so you know, once my computer comes back up and I'm able to access Apple Music, I won't be playing the music of Tony Bennett on this podcast because I don't have clearance for that. But you can play it. I just want to see if the project is there. So, okay, so S Wonderful, Nice Work if you can get it. You know, because he's done some really great projects. He did that project with Michael Bublé, and then Lady Gaga did a project with her, Stephanie Germanotta, and now Diana Krall. So I just want to see what's there, what's accessible. If it's not accessible, then I'll go ahead and wait and discuss that with you in our next podcast, which will be next Tuesday. So I hope you'll tune in for that. Next week, by the way, should be a little bit more scripted, so it doesn't feel like I'm taking too much time to get from one thing to the next. But I like taking my time. Just feels more organic and a little less rushed. So thank you for sticking with me. If you are driving on your way to work or on the road and you need a podcast that will take up some time as you're driving, I invite you to use this to fill some of your time. Okay, so far I wrote down 2 tunes. And let's get a third one. Love is Here to Stay. I like that one. So what you'll see me write over at CMajor's classroom, I'm not going to write the sequence so much. I'm just going to write a list of the songs for you to pay attention to. Okay, then, let's see. Should we do I Got Rhythm? I like They Can't Take That Away From Me. I like that one. So it's either I Got Rhythm or I've Got a Crush on You. Which one should we do? Either one is good, right? Just do both. Okay, so I'll do I Got Rhythm. So then it's going to mean 6 songs that I'm listing. I've Got a Crush on You. And They Can't Take That Away From Me. Okay, so what I like is that this project appears to be a Gershwin project. I just want to take a look, see, oh, okay, this looks good. Well, it's still coming back on my computer. There's the color wheel that's spinning, as usual. Okay, so we have just a few more moments. Okay, so while I'm doing that, I have the 6 songs that I picked out for you to study. Okay, so let's go to the next song. So I'm going to type in "nice work," if you can get it. Now I recall crossing paths with a really wonderful pianist who recorded this. He did like a whole album of what seemed like just jazz standards. And this is one of those. Nice work, if you can get it. I wonder what happened to him. Meaning, I think he may have left the area. I think he was basically from the tri-state area, but he may have left to go to Europe or something like that. Nice work if you can get it. Which happens sometimes if you're a jazz musician, you may find that sometimes you have to leave the tri-state area. But when you're in New York, you're in New York. Okay, so here it is. Nice work if you can get it. So let's tap on that. And I like that you have so many different arrangements too. Okay, now. So I'm seeing that you can see the sequence up top. So what you see also, and my students sometimes have this question too, of what to do with these guitar symbols. That's for the guitar. So the guitar player knows what to do with that. So if you see something that looks like a grid, it's really just showing you the outline of the chords on guitar strings. So that's for the guitar. But above that, you see your chord symbols. So it starts out as B 7th chord, followed by a B flat 7th chord, followed by an A minor 7th chord, followed by an A flat 7th chord, followed by a G chord, followed by an E diminished 7th chord, followed by an A minor 7th chord. This has a lot of great 7th chords in it. So if you go below that, then you're going to run into 9th chords, which we haven't talked about yet. But again, you don't have to wait for me. See if you can find your way around. Either use the poster that we talked about today to help you, or get yourself one of those chord books. I recently had a student that purchased a chord book so that he has, at his fingertips, access to the chords and how to play those. So when I'm not there, he can help himself and can explore the chords that he wants to play. And then during the lesson, we can talk about the other options for him. Okay, so that looks good. So musicnotes.com is just one way to find these. I'm going to also go with you over to Sheet Music Plus to see what's there as well, using these same 6 songs. So Love Is Here to Stay. Let's look at that one. That's the next one. Don't you love how I'm doing this with you in real time? We're live here on the CMajor radio show. You're here with CMajor. And I'm going live with you on the computer. Love Is Here to Stay. Let's search that. Okay, so just tapped on the piano / vocal / guitar. Version. Okay, and whoever arranged this, they gave us a nice fancy introduction. And then you go down to the bottom of the first page and you'll see D7 chord, followed by G minor 7th, followed by C diminished 7th, and then you have a C9 chord, you have a split bass chord, F over A, and you have an A flat diminished 7th chord. So as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, okay, we need to at some point talk about diminished chords and augmented chords. But I'm not sure if I want to make that a part of the keyboard situation, playing by chords and by color series. I'm not sure if I want to do that. Hopefully you are staying up on your color though, because the keyboard poster I was talking about earlier, they did a really fun thing with color on that poster. And so you can follow the colors that they've used there, or create your own color. Create your own color code so that you're comfortable with that. I think that's the fun thing. Let your colors take you where you want to go. I think that's the idea of using color in your piano playing. And aside from that, just from an auditory standpoint, I've even heard people say that they hear in color. So they'll hear a certain chord as a color. So for instance, the key of A, they hear as a bright key. And so they think of the color yellow when they're playing an A chord, or if they're playing an A major scale. So there are lots of ways to think about it. So again, this is your music making. You can do it however you want to. Excuse me, I think back in the 1950s, there might have been some restrictions on how color was used in those publications that I've talked about on this podcast and over at the CMajor radio show. But I think the sky is the limit. I think with the idea of color mixing, you don't even have to use primary colors. You can use as many color combinations as you want, as you wish. So, let's see here what's happening. If I could pull up. It just says checking the iTunes library. I don't know what that means. I don't know what it's checking it for, or if I'll be able to get iTunes back in the next few minutes, but let's just keep trying, since my computer decided to reset itself. Okay, so love is here to stay. Now let's go over to I Got Rhythm. Okay, so if I tap on the first one of that, okay, so it's bringing up the first page again. So the sequence is G minor, followed by C minor, followed by G minor 6th chord, followed by E flat 7, followed by G minor, E flat, G minor 6, E flat minor 6, G minor, D minor 7, G minor, D minor 7, G minor. Okay, so the only one that would be unfamiliar to you would be the 6th chord, because we haven't talked about that. You may be able to figure that out. Okay, now, I think my iTunes might be back in action. So let me see if I can pull that out really quick. There's the color wheel again, spinning, spinning, spinning. Okay, give that a few moments to get itself together. And I'll just keep typing songs. Okay, so I've Got a Crush on You. Okay, great. I think my iTunes just came back up. But what I wanted to do was go over to Apple Music and see what was in the store. I just love how my Mac wants to update right in the middle of my podcast. I've got a crush on you. But updates are necessary, aren't they? If we don't update, how can we have the latest and the greatest when it comes to our devices? Okay, so now I've got a crush on you. Even that's spinning. Go over to the website. Now that's spinning. Okay, now I've got a crush on you. That starts off with B flat, E flat, B flat, E flat, a B6 chord, F7 chord, B flat, F diminished, F7, B flat, okay, did I say B6? Maybe I meant B flat. Okay, it was small. Okay, now I'm blowing it up. B flat to E flat, then to B flat. Okay, so not so many 7 chords on that first page to deal with. Okay, oh, here it is. Love is here to stay. There it is. Thank you, Apple Music. All right, this was released on September 14th. So if you are interested, go to this project. I happen to have a copy of it, and it was a gift to me, and I'm really, really grateful for it. It's a great project. I'm going to be listening to it once this podcast ends, but what I like is that it is a project between Tony Bennett and Diana Krall. So there's a little bit of an iTunes review there. It just said, after celebrated duets with Lady Gaga and others, Tony Bennett finds a deep affinity with jazz improviser and songbook veteran Diana Krall on this set of Gershwin classics. Not since Rosemary Clooney has a Bennett partner demonstrated such respect for lyric and melody, or so much lively spontaneity. Krall's smooth, urbane tone complements Bennett's clipped, streetwise charisma most effectively on Fascinating Rhythm and I've Got a Crush on You, while Do It Again sinks into coyness. Okay, so Fascinating Rhythm and Do It Again are not part of your assigned songs to listen to, but if you care to, for extra credit, so now I'm going to write this at the bottom of my CMajor's classroom assignment. If you care to listen to those other tunes, you can. Okay, so let me put extra listening, also known as extra credit. I'm going to put Fascinating Rhythm, and I'm going to put Do It Again. But you know, physical CDs are so hard to come by nowadays, so I'm really ungrateful to have the physical copy as well as access to this recording on Apple Music. So if you have a chance to, go ahead and listen to the whole project, but just know that I'm challenging you to play along with the 7 chords and the songs that I'm listing a little bit later over at CMajor's classroom. So it's taken from this project. It's nice to have this project available to us. Okay, so they can't take that away from me. I think that's where we are right now. Okay, so if I tap on the first tune of that in music notes, CMajor, pulling that up. Okay, so if I tap on this, did it come up yet? Okay, everything takes such a long time. Why is no one ready? Okay, here we go. Alright, so E flat, 6 chord, E flat minor 6, A diminished 7, E flat 6 over B flat, E flat 6, B flat 7 chord, plus a flat 9, and then you have some 7 chords. I'll just skip down to the 7ths. E flat 7th, F minor 7, A diminished 7, B flat 7th. Okay. So if you have a chance to go to those chords, go to those songs that we talked about. Okay, and then the next visit would be to go over to Sheet Music Plus. Let's go over there. And then I'm going to go to my Facebook with you, because I promised I would talk about something over there. I was going to mention the GarageBand. I mentioned it earlier, but I was going to mention that. Okay, now I typed in Sheet Music Plus, and what came up was Sheet. Nice. Let's just go back to see if it'll let me go to Sheet Music Plus. Oh, and I still have to talk to you about my concert that I went to over the weekend. Okay, there we go. So here you can also shop for both digital and print music. So they will actually ship you the color version of the music, cover and all. So it's not just a place to get downloads. Okay, so let's just go with our first one. It's wonderful. Okay, now what I love about She Music Plus is that right away you just see so many options for ordering the music, having it shipped to you, a digital download, whatever you care to. So look over there too, because you may decide you want to actually put your hands on a book. And also what you can see is like the different arrangements for big band. You can see complete works for solo piano by Gershwin. You may just decide to order that. And then the very best of Diana Krall, who again is working with Mr. Bennett as well. So take a look at that. They give you a timeline of how long it takes to leave their warehouse, and then they give you a price point for the item. So whether you're a teacher, whether you're a student, whether you are a non-musician who just wants a song, a musician, there's so many options over here for these songs that I'm mentioning, okay? So when you look over at C Major's Classroom a little bit later, just know you have a couple of options of where to find these online. And then if you need to find these songs in person, then I have suggestions for that too. Okay, so see me offline for those suggestions as well. The accessibility to sheet music has changed so much over the years. It really has. Okay, so let's step out of that for a moment. And now let's go to Facebook. So you've seen me post a couple of things over at CMajor before the show, and it's just an option. It's just to give you an idea of what you're going to be experiencing here on the show. And as usual, my Facebook friends are at it again, posting all this negative stuff. Let's try to stay positive. Okay, so let's go over to... Oh, somebody liked the memory that I shared. That's nice. Okay, so not all of my Facebook friends are grumpy. Grumpy musicians. So thank you, Facebook friend. Okay, that's good. So now, don't you love it, how I talk when I'm live? So I just like to make it fun and funny for my listeners. Okay, so now, CMajor before the show has a notification. So let's see what that's about. It's probably asking me to boost something. So I see an activity. What is that? Notification. Oh, yep, it's asking me to boost my post. Okay, sorry Facebook, I love you. I'm not boosting anything right now until I know I have the followers that I need to make that type of investment. Now, it looks like I have some sort of insights that are coming up. Okay, I'll look at that later. Okay. But Facebook is great, isn't it? It is. It really is. Okay, so CMajor before the show. Okay, so it's amazing how on my iPad it looks like that photo was dimmed. That's why I said that last week, But if I go to my regular computer, it does not look dimmed. It looks very clear. The part where I color-coded the keys. So here we are on Spreaker.com, the keyboard situation played by Chords and by color part 8. I hope you're having a good time. Thank you so much for joining me. Give yourselves a hand clap. And thank you for being here today. It's great to have you here. And we are over here on the part where I was talking about the GarageBand tutorial. So I just said we will briefly mention this on CMajor before the show. Now the reason I wanted to mention this is because I had a friend on Facebook who's a musician friend, and what he started to do was to let me know that he, even though he doesn't read music, he's still able to create music. And I thought, that's a good reminder. So for those who are not into reading the music and you just want to create music, there we go. The music is back up. Thank you, iTunes. So for those who are not interested in notating their music, but yet you want to get into sound recording, GarageBand is a great way to do that. So all of my years in high-tech, working in high-tech, I ran across so many musicians that just reminded me constantly that this is how they create their music. And so basically the place where I worked in music retail, we were the school for them because they really came to us for us to show them what's the best thing to get into. And we would always say, try GarageBand first and then go into Logic. So this video was a great tutorial. If you have a chance to look at it, because I'm personally interested in continuing to do my own work in high tech and my own recordings as a recording indie artist, and I'm thinking about where I want to go next. So my music making is going to involve recording all over again using the approach that I use for for my last recording, but making it even better with a different focus this time. So a little bit less focus on the heartbreak and more focus on the wonder. So that's what's coming up next for C major, in case you were wondering. But I also have a special place in my heart for house music and deep house. So I don't know how that's going to come into play. It may find its way in a separate project altogether. But I wanted to know how to build my own tracks by making my own house music tracks. So this was what popped up, and I think it's just a great example of how to make a basic track altogether. Of course, there are DVDs, there are plenty of videos online, lynda.com, Lynda, I believe it's still spelled that way, and you can look there. There are so many resources that I learned about, again, just through my friends that would come through who are so successful in their own music careers, and they would let me know they're gigging every single night, they're gigging twice a night, they're gigging 3 times a night, making all this money so they can come and buy all of this equipment, trying to pull me out there with them. Just kudos to all of you guys. You guys do great work out there. Let me give you guys an applause for that. You guys really inspire me because you're the ones out there in the grind, doing the hustle every single day of the week and making it happen in terms of music making, money making, all of that. So more power to you. And so you inspired me to do what I do with my composition and my mixing. And so GarageBand is a great way to get started in that. You can use Apple loops, just whatever it takes, but it's not going to show up as notation. It will show up as color-coded, and you'll be able to see how each track does its own thing. But I like how clearly it's explained in this tutorial. So if you have a chance, check it out. It's called the GarageBand tutorial, How to Make a Basic Track. Composition and mixing instructor John Davies will take you through the basics of GarageBand for an introduction to the world of music production. So that's another way to get into your own music making too. Another way to go ahead and start expressing your feelings in a musical way. Now that you know something about chords, and today you're learning about 7 chords, jump in there and just do it. Now, what if you're saying, well, C major, I think this is where I want to stop when it comes to learning 7 chords. I don't want to learn any more about chords. I have enough. Fine. You know what? I have some good news for you. So now I'm going to turn to my other idea. So I'm so excited because I was able to attend over the weekend a free concert. I really like that word, free. The reason I do is that I believe that if you can, you should charge for people to see your tickets. You should charge tickets. You should charge for tickets. You should charge for people to see you make your music. But if you are in a position to offer something free, just know it really is helpful for those who want and desire to have that, and it makes it accessible to everyone. So this was a free concert that I went to in South Jersey. So I'm going to actually post a picture of this on the C Major Before page, so look for that. I'm not going to spill all of the beans about it, but what I want to do now is talk a little bit about the program notes, because for anyone who is interested in writing their own music and making their own music, these composers are really inspiring for that, because they are not only following in the footsteps of other composers, they are also coming out with new ideas, documenting those ideas and bringing it to the academic community, which is important. So here's one, and I'm going to mention this one over at the CMajor radio show tomorrow, but it's a piece that explores all the ways that a bar of 9/4 time can be subdivided. So we were talking about time signatures over at the CMajor radio show, so I'm going to be mentioning that. And this is also where I wanted to bring in some of my math friends, because I just love talking about the combinations of different divisions in music and what the possibilities are. But this one particular composer, she used harmonies to evolve over time. So they were using mainly percussion instruments in this concert, but still just the whole idea, the thought behind the composition was so fascinating. Okay, so now let me go over to, this is what I really loved, this composer. And she wrote in a way that no conventional notation was used whatsoever. So she used her score to write it much in the way that you would write out a recipe when you're cooking, or follow a recipe when you're cooking. So it says the score consists of recipe-like instructions, which are the same for each player. Each performer is responsible for their own part within the guidelines given. Since there is no written part to watch, all the performer's attention can be given to sound and invention. And this is all happening in the performance itself. The shape of each meditation emerges from the nature of the score guidelines and the dynamic interplay of the orchestra members. There is no melody, no harmony, and no metrical rhythm. The direction is sound-oriented. So I thought that was great. I mean, to have here in the 21st century, you have these type of experiments going on in real time in a performance, but it's also thought ahead of time as well. And to be honest, this was something that came about in the 20th century. So the piece was composed back in 1971, but here we are in the 21st century still presenting the same piece. So it's great. It's an idea that's carried over into our time. So just be encouraged by that. I mean, if you think that just because you're at a certain high academic level that you can't reach back and do something as unconventional as this, then just know that the academic community is open to the possibilities. The other thing to consider is, how are you discussing your music making? Do you have the tools to do that? Music literacy definitely helps with that. Sometimes you can put it into more literacy terms when you're talking about your music making. It just gives you a whole new language to explain what it is that you're doing, if you care to explain it. So, but it's up to you. It's up to you. So now let me close this, and let me close out of my Facebook. Okay. Let me check on the time. So we're about 14 minutes away from going into the third hour. And so what I want to do now is go over to the piano really quickly. I'm going to take my textbook with me. And then as we're going into the third hour, I'm going to give you that drill to use with the 7th chords. Okay, so over here in the textbook, it's just talking about how to play an 8 to the bar boogie. So this great sounding boogie bass pattern is often called 8 to the bar because it uses 8/8 notes in a measure. And then they're saying warm up first by playing measures 1 through 4 several times with the left hand alone, and then try to play it in a blues style. So I don't know if I'm going to do that, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of an idea of what the sound is like for 7th chords before I try to play everything as a black chord. Okay, so let me just look out here for a second and let some sunshine in before I go back to my keyboard. Okay. Alright, so let's get back to the keyboard. So let's make sure my sound is on. Here my piano. Let me stop this music for a second. Okay, now let's make sure my GarageBand is still pulled up. My GarageBand. Oh, I see my keyboard went off. So my input's changed. Okay. Just bear with me 1 second. So GarageBand may or may not come up for me. Oh, there's loading. Okay, so for right now, this is the sound that's coming from the instrument itself. Okay, so that was one example. Let me play another example. So this is called Sleepy Town Boogie. So I'm just playing just one hand right now. Okay, that's a 7th chord sound, F7, G7, and then F7. Okay, then a C7. And then you have a D flat 7, which is nice. Okay. So the thing is that when you start playing examples of 7 chords within a song, sometimes it doesn't sound as full, but it's still labeled because the harmony is spread out throughout the melody. So here. These are not planned examples, by the way. They're just me paging through. Okay. What I like about this is that they're definitely giving you the structure. Okay, so what I'm going to do in the 3rd hour is just give you a way to play those chords a certain way by playing them in a fuller position. So we've talked about playing it the most simplest way as a triad divided between 2 hands. But sometimes it's a little easier to see if you're using both hands on the keyboard and then you know what to press between the 2 hands and to give it a fuller sound. Now, I will caution you about this because it doesn't necessarily agree with the whole voicing idea that you come across in blues and jazz. So, and certainly as we're seeing now, the way the melody is spelled out, is done in a way so that it appears as a composed way of presenting 7 chords and not just a way of oh, but I like this is that it's combining C major 7 with A minor 7. So you know what, I might start with this one today. So I have a C major 7 chord followed by an A minor 7 chord, and then followed by a D minor 7 chord, followed by a G, A minor 7, E minor 7, and then A minor 7, and then an E flat 7, and then a G. Okay, so that's a nice progression to actually start with. If you want something to warm up on that sounds like you put some thought into it. Okay. And then you have some other suggestions here. C major 7 chord. Okay, so again, I'm not a blues player, not a jazz player. I can teach what's here in the book, but there are professionals out there that do this so much better, meaning that's what they're focused on, that's where their gift lies. So I'm not claiming to have that gift, but I am claiming to have the information that can help you a little bit with your understanding of what's expected. And that's because of my teachers that I had that pass on information like this to us in a classroom setting. So it's a very organized way of helping you to start playing blues and jazz, and a great way to help you with 7 chords. But we were taught by a master teacher, and we were taught by a performer who did this in his work, in his life's work. So that's where this is pulled from, but we can learn something from it. So what I'm going to do now, because we have about 7 minutes to go before we head over into that third hour, and I'm going to play some music for you, and then we're going to come back because it will be time to go into our third hour. So thank you for sticking with me today, and see if I can bring up my iTunes right now. And I'm going to play some music for you. And I'll be back in a moment. Back in a moment. You're here with C Major on C Major before the show, and we are getting ready to go into our third hour. We're about 4 minutes away. So what I want to do is just to kind of give you an idea of where we're starting with that. So we have talked about major chords, right? We talked about minor chords. So you can do a major chord, minor chord, back to major chord drill. I even talk with you about how to play that in full position. Right? Okay, but today we're going to talk about 7 chords and what that means. So you heard me say earlier from the idea of playing from the poster that gives you a quick way to access these chords, what you can do. So you can do that for a 7 chord. I'm going to show you differently. Okay, so basically I just went from, you can hear me spelling it out, there's 4 notes. So excuse me, that's really what that sound was I was trying to get you to hear. Okay, so that's an example of one song, that would use the 7 chords. But I'm just going to explain to you today how to use the 7 chords as a drill. So thank you so much for tuning with me today. Just to give you an idea of the structure of today's show. We're a little bit all over the place on purpose. So I appreciate when I see on the internet all these things popping up from Grammarly and all these other websites saying, work on your writing, or edX will send me an email saying, improve your writing. I know I need to improve my writing. But what I'm aiming to do on this podcast is just kind of lead you organically from one thought to the next on how to get into playing your instrument. So a lot of times it's best to do that unscripted. And other times it's best to do it scripted. So I have plenty of friends in the writing business who can help me with that. So I will be calling on you guys if you're listening to the podcast. These are people that I know and that I trust to help me with writing and putting things together for the podcast. So look forward to that C Major is planning to get better and better at podcasting and writing scripts and working in a way that's a little bit more helpful to you. So we started off today by encouraging you, talking with you about your ideas for music making, delving into the textbook that talks about 7 chords. And so after that, we also presented you with some things to consider for a sequence. And we gave you a little bit of history for jazz and blues. We talked about a poster that you can use to help you spell out your chords and to talk to you about traditional notation. I also gave you some ideas about what we're going to be talking about on tomorrow's C Major radio show. So this show serves as a lead into that show. So if you care to, come over there and see us. I'd love to see you over there. So here we are, just a few seconds away from the third hour. Thank you for joining us here on C Major before the show. I'm glad to have you here. Give yourselves a round of applause. And thank you for joining us today. So here we are in the third hour. So what I want to do is give you a drill to go through. Okay? So I'm going to be playing in a fuller chord position today. So I hope you'll be able to hear what I'm doing. And I'll announce what I'm doing as I go along. Okay? So C chord is first. Okay, and if you hear any clicking or squeaking, it's coming from my pedal because I am playing from a MIDI instrument. I'm playing from a MIDI keyboard. I'm not at my grand piano today, or my upright acoustic piano, but I'm playing basically from a slab. So this is a C chord, and what I'm doing is playing a triad in the middle. I'm playing tonic on the top, tonic on the bottom to give it that full sound. So if I take my left hand away, you'll see it as a first inversion C triad, and then with my left hand, if I take my right hand away, you'll see it as a C octave. So that's a C chord, okay, C minor, back to C. Now I'm going to play a C7, okay, and now I'm going to play a C minor 7. And now I'm going to go back to C, and now I'm going to play a C major 7. Okay, so you can hear the difference there. Okay, so that's kind of the drill I'm going to be following. I might mix it up a little bit, but I think that's pretty much what I'm going to do today. Then F, F minor, F, F7, F minor 7, F, F major 7. Now I'm going to go to G, do the same thing. G, G minor, G, G7, G minor 7, G, and then G major 7, D, So I'm just going to deal with those 6 for right now. Last week we did talk about flat chords, so hopefully you had a chance to review those. You can do the same thing with the flats. As some of my students like to say, yeah, just reverse it, or just move everything a half step lower. So feel free to explore that. I'm just going to work with the 6 right now, and then you can explore as you will. Okay, but have fun with it. Have fun with it. So now it's going to play. I'm not going to say anything, and then I'll come back and say something at the end of the warm up or at the end of the drill. Okay, so hopefully you were able to hear what I was doing. I was just basically going straight through and just playing it as a drill, as a warm-up, as a workout, if you will. And now I'm going to mix up the order of things just by playing some, not rhythms, but I'm just going to play it more broken, so you'll hear that. Okay, so I hope you were able to follow that. Now, what I want to do now is play that for you again. This time I'm going to change the tone. So let me just make sure I'm doing that over here so that you can hear the tone that I intend for you to have. Because I was coming straight from the keyboard. I think when I turn my music down, I turn down my monitor. Okay, so now I want it to come through my monitor this time. Okay, so hopefully, so let me just see if I can lower my fan a little bit. working properly. Okay, so hopefully you're able to follow the sound of what I was doing. So I was basically just playing everything broken, and I wanted you to experience it as the grand piano sound that I used in GarageBand, and then in the future, what I hope to do is to get even better piano sounds so that you can hear it on a different piano sound or an improved piano sound. I'll say it like that. So just look forward to that. So thank you so much for joining me. We made it over into our third hour again today, so give yourselves a round of applause for that. And continue to explore seventh chords. So again, the sequence that I want to assign for your homework this week is going to be just putting together this sequence. So if you have a pencil and you have paper, write this down. If you're unable to write it down, just listen to the broadcast. We are available on demand for you. So this is the sequence. I'm going to play it as block chords, and then I'll figure out what to do after that. Okay, so I'm just going to give you, let's see what I want to do. I think I'll give it to you as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah, I'll give it to you as that, just straight. I also will give you some options to do some repeats if you care to do that. Okay? All right, but just the sequence. I'm not going to play this as a melody, and I'm going to play everything in root position. So if you're listening for me to play any voicing, I'm not doing that. I would advise you to get with a teacher who can help you with figuring out what to leave out, what to put in, and to give you some voicing ideas. But that's not what we're doing right now. We're just getting you to hear everything as played in the root position and then taking it from there. Okay? All right, so the first chord, and I'll shout it out to you as we go along. So we're mixing up the 7 chords that you learned today with other chords. So major 7 chords, minor 7 chords, and major chords for this sequence. Also, I'm going to go ahead and throw in an A flat chord. Okay, so remember A flat from last week? So if you play an A flat chord, it will look like this in root position. You do that. Okay. It will look like that or sound like that as an A flat minor chord. A flat 7 chord would be that. Okay. Minor 7 chord would be that. Okay, and then of course, if you did an A flat major 7 chord, it would sound like that. Okay, but we're just going to use the A flat 7 chord in the root position. Okay. Okay, so basically I'm going to go from C major 7, okay, and then go over to A minor 7, D minor 7, and then to a G chord, E minor 7, A minor 7, A flat 7, and then G. And then go to C, C7 chord, F chord, go to F minor, and then back to C, then G7, and then a C7 chord, another C7, another C7, another C7, okay, now a C major 7, then A minor 7, D minor 7, and then G, and then E minor, and A minor, and then D minor, and then G, and then back to C. Okay, so just pretend you're in a college classroom where you have a professor that is playing these chords and he's shouting them out, because that's how we learned to play by chords and by ear during our ear training class. He was just literally shouting them out. Say, do you hear that? It's a C major 7 chord. We're like, yes, we hear it. But it's very different than when you go to an analysis class where you actually have to analyze it and write in the Roman numerals and know what's leading to what. But he really tried to give you a sense, this professor really tried to give you a sense of how chords lead into other chords and lead away from other chords. So I would even say, if you can, get to a keyboard and just play along with it. I encourage that too. So I have a student now that's working on a popular song that she found on YouTube, and I'm encouraging her to play along with the recording so she gets a feel of how the rhythm flows, and it's just practice. It's all practice. Okay, so now I'm just going to play it. I'm not going to say anything. I'm actually going to repeat some sections, so it's going to make this longer for you to practice with, okay? But feel free to use this as your practice structure for this week, your warm-up, your chord warm-up, using the chords that we spoke about today, and I hope you have fun with it, okay? So listen out for the repeats, the repeated sections, and also listen to see how long I'm holding each chord. I'm not playing anything fancy. I'm not playing any rhythms. I'm just playing the chord in its most simplest and its most simple form, in its simplest form, in full position though. In full position. Okay, here we go. Okay, so hopefully you were able to follow all of that and just have fun with it. Thank you so much for joining me today here on the C Major Before the Show episode, the keyboard situation, playing by chords and by color. It's part 8, and feel free to color those chords. So now that you know the sequence, then try to just write in your own colors to change the visual for you to know what you're going to, what you're stepping away from and things like that. So you may want to color your C major 7 chord. You may want to color that yellow. And then shade in your A minor 7th chord. You may want to color that something else, maybe orange. But I'll leave that up to you and just have fun with it, okay? So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you here next week. And we will be a little bit more scripted next week, I promise. And we will try to bring to you some of the things that are happening in the tri-state area, in the greater New York City area, just to make the broadcast interesting for you. I will be able to say a little bit more about the project that I introduced. I will say a little bit more about that next week. I'm just waiting for some other promotional things to happen with it first, so I don't get ahead of what's scheduled for the publishers of that project. So I'm happy to bring to you anything that's new, that's relevant, that comes across my desk. And feel free to reach out to me. You can reach me on Twitter at CMajorPorter1. You can also reach me over at Facebook over at CMajor Before the Show. And then also feel free to reach me over at CMajor's Classroom on WordPress, CMajorsClassroom.wordpress.com. Why am I having trouble saying my social media today? It's because I'm thinking ahead. I'm thinking ahead of myself. But Music Glue. Now, if you care to go to my Music Glue page, that's something that I'm building. It's a website that is in its most basic form, an introduction to the music of C major, and then we'll take it from there. But thank you for joining me today. I'll see you on tomorrow on the C Major radio show over at Blog Talk Radio. So join me then, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Have a great day. And don't forget to make music.